He was built out of parts from several corpses before he was made alive in a laboratory. So yes, in this Halloween season's Living Dead video series, Frankenstein's monster qualifies. Welcome to my channel, KC, that's me, Carrie Chug the Sledge Storyteller. I love talking about storytelling as an art form in any medium and its history. If you like this video, please click like. If you like this channel, please click subscribe. And while you're at it, make one more click on the notification button. Thank you. But the Frankenstein's franchise wasn't what I was initially planning for this video, actually. I had my sights set on the mummy trope, but when our video came out on the very subject from a channel that I'm a regular on, The History Guy, he had every beat I was going to possibly plan on covering, and I hate feeling like I'm making a video in which I'm just knowingly aping another one, where I don't feel like I have anything more or different to offer on the subject matter. I have been hesitant to cover Frankenstein since, as I had mentioned 2 videos ago, I had already made a Frankenstein-based video on obscure facts on the subject matter. That was 2 years ago, but after looking at it again, I decided I could approach it differently in the style of my previous 2 videos. But for an in-depth look at the background story of Mary Shelley's creation process and of her timeless novel, there's a link in the description. Here we go.
So here we are in 1910, 79 years after Mary Shelley's revised edition of Frankenstein, with all the well-known tragedies that came with it. We're all about 14 years since the beginning of horror in film, largely developed by George Méliès. Thomas Edison's production company is the first to produce a Frankenstein movie, 16 minutes long, so it goes without saying that the story got diluted, and unlike the novel, had a happy ending. Fast forward 21 years when Universal Studios exec Carl Laemmle Jr. kept the monster ball rolling. Is the first one with the monster character design that comes to mind initially when we think of Frankenstein. Boris Karloff, with his makeup job courtesy of specialist Jack Pierce, emerged on screen with classic flat top head, thick forehead, heavy eyelids, neck bolt, and loose-fitting clothes. A look carried on in succession by Dracula actor Bela Lugosi, Wolfman actor Lon Chaney Jr., and TV Western actor Glenn Strange. And then there's Fred Gwynne on the monsters, as was the case for Dracula, only loosely based on the source material. Whereas in the novel, the monster grows to be highly intelligent, they barely ever get him to speak in the movies until Herman Munster is depicted as articulate, yet only comically so. The overall plots are vastly different between the novel and movies. The first movie is much more condensed in development of Frankenstein's work and figuring out how he can bring the dead back to life. And while the novel ends in a ship in the Arctic where Frankenstein dies from cold and exhaustion, and the monster is left in the Arctic to die presumably from the elements. And the movie ends with a mob burning down a windmill with the monster inside, while Frankenstein, he continues on with his life as a newlywed. The sequel, The Bride of Frankenstein, develops things further, where a surprisingly surviving monster and somewhat similar to the original novel, we see him visiting a house with an old man living there who helps him start learning to speak. Then later, also loosely based on the novel, they bring a female corpse to life. She completely rejects Frankenstein's monster.
Now, all during this time, the Frankenstein story had long been in the public domain, so nothing could stop any other studio from making their own version. And I can't help but think that for years, nobody dared try out that because of the fear that the Universal monster design had become so ingrained in the general public's minds that a new one would have them thinking, that ain't Frankenstein's monster.
But Hammer Studios showed they had guts. They picked up Christopher Lee and his imposing frame to be the monster to Peter Cushing's Frankenstein and The Curse of Frankenstein. And while in the novel, Victor Frankenstein makes some of the most reprehensible decisions that make him in varying degrees responsible for several deaths in the story. This Frankenstein commits murder with zero remorse, leaving you indifferent to whatever his creation may do to him. And while Christopher Lee's makeup job is vastly different than what was famous with Boris Karloff, may consider Lee's to be more accurate.
But let's get Mary Shelley's description.
His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips.
How some people read that and see Christopher Lee's is beyond me.
Peter Cushing remained mostly constant as Victor Frankenstein, with succeeding actors Michael Gwynne in The Revenge of Frankenstein, Kiwi Kingston in The Evil of Frankenstein, Susan Denberg in Frankenstein Created Woman, Freddie Jones in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and before filling Darth Vader's shoes, David Prowse in Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, and The Horror of Frankenstein, the latter of which Ralph Bates took over as Frankenstein the Scientist. Now, since the Frankenstein story is public domain, it becomes inevitable that scores of studios are going to jump on it with their own take.
But to go into depth on all those interpretations and what it would mean making this video run for multiple hours, but there are two adaptations I would love to mention and go in depth on.
Number 1, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which came out in 1994 and was helmed by Kenneth Branagh, who also played Victor Frankenstein himself, and has Robert De Niro playing the monster, playing him with Robert De Niro intensity. It's much more faithful than the earlier Universal productions, as well as the Hammer films, in which it follows much the same succession of events of the novel, though it does take heavy liberties toward the end in how it deals with Victor's wife's death, but it goes a long way in emphasizing his escalation into madness. Number 2, a 1992 TV movie that aired on the TNT cable network with Patrick Bergin as Victor Frankenstein.
And Randy Quaid, yes, Cousin Eddie from the Vacation movies, as the monster.
But Quaid's makeup easily makes it so you won't expect that it's him playing the role, and he wonderfully plays the role in both phases of the frightened creature amid ignorant people and the bitter and vengeful creature post-education. As well, Bergen as Frankenstein captures Victor's sheer obsession with his taboo science, and also ably checks the boxes for the key events of the story. Beyond just that the story is open to anyone who wants to put their spin on it, it has proven to have lasting appeal for underlying messages of scientific overreach, playing with fire, disregard for parental accountability, hatred for your own creation, ignoring accountability for the consequences of your choices, creating dangers against the loved ones, and letting anger become sheer madness that completely clouds your judgment. I could go on, but these are character elements that are timeless, and the Frankenstein story has inspired countless other stories with a similar premise.
But that's this year's take on Frankenstein. Agree, disagree, or something I left out? Please let me know in the comment section. The link to order Sledge comic miniseries is in the link below in both digital and paper format. Give it a look. But I'll always say it. Let's all look for civility amid all the bad news out there about social and political strife. You know, in the U.S., the election's coming up. Let's behave ourselves. Let's not be sore over whatever the results may be. Let's not hate. Let's find friends wherever we may go. Everyone be safe, and God bless.